Back to navigating in a shaky world. Our next three guests are here to inspire you on how that can be done. Because over the last few years, the three of them have had to deal with more challenges and crises than perhaps ever before in such a short period of time. Let me just mention turnarounds and pandemic, supply chain disruptions, war in Europe, cyber threats, inflation, and geopolitical rift, just to mention a few. So welcome Anja Monrad to the stage, please, and Jens Bjørn Andersen to the stage as well, and Alexander Lacik. Please give them a warm helm to welcome them. Come up here, guys. We have free seating, so you can just choose. Yeah, you take the middle, Anja, because then I'll have a chance to thank you extraordinarily. Of course, thanks to you guys as well. But Anja was kind enough to step in at a very short notice, as unfortunately we had the cancellation from Marianne Kirkegaard. So Anja, could we give her a hand for that? Yes. Thank you, Anja.
I guess that's a little bit premature to clap, but
I'm sure there will be lots of clapping. But let's turn to the subject of navigating through uncertainty and the few years that have gone by where being... Are you eating candy?
Yeah, it's fine. It's good.
Oh. Oh, that's okay. I talked to the three of you before this conversation on stage, and Jens, you mentioned one thing to me that I'd like to quote you on, and I hope I can do that to start it off. You said to me on the phone, the last few years have been more crazy than the 25 years before. So just to start us off with the uncertainty you guys had to navigate through, what has it been like to be a CEO for the past few years?
It has been more crazy. That's I actually mean it when I say it. I've been fortunate enough to be in our company in DSV for the last 35 years, the last 15 as a CEO. And when I try to reflect about what we've been seeing, it is the truth that what actually kick-started with COVID has meant that we've never seen anything like it. We had no contingency plan of a worldwide pandemic hitting us. I have to agree to that. I don't know how many of you in this room had that. We had to deal with that from one day to the other. We really had to take care of the safety and the well-being of our staff, which was, of course, very different from other crises that we were in. At the same time, we had to find new ways of working. We have all tried that. Working from home was not easy. We had the technology to do it. It was great. It was fantastic. Also, actually, that we've got some sort of recognition amongst the people from actually helping. We all forgot how it was. There were no hand sanitizers, no face masks in Europe. It was all in China. There were no airplanes because they were all grounded. We still managed to get it home. We did vaccine distribution. It's not so easy to do vaccine distribution at minus 70 degrees in South Africa, for instance. And then the war in Ukraine hit. So there's been multiple issues that we have to deal with. So it's not been easy.
Busy times for you as well, Anja, all through all of this as well. What's it been like for you? You stopped at Dell a few months ago, but until then, what was it like?
Yeah, I think it... being in the IT industry, and I've been in Dell for 23 years, obviously we had the IT bubble back in 2008, so it wasn't the first time I felt I had to navigate through uncertainty and a crisis with my team, but I think that the amount of crises that just stacked on really made it so difficult. And personally, when you're used to be traveling like 3-4 days a week, 3 weeks a month, and all of a sudden be grounded because of a pandemic, and having a team that have only been in an IT industry that has been growing and been successful, and all of a sudden, with all of the changes, required a totally different leadership. And I guess for me personally, one thing was that I was very uncertain about how do I lead my team through this, but I also realized that I was managing a team across all of the countries that actually never had experienced difficult times. So all of a sudden, they were leaders that had been managing through success, and it's a totally different leadership style to having to take teams through a difficult time. So not only did I have to navigate with the things, but also having to bring a team that never tried it before. And I think that was what really made it stand out. But that said, you know, I was managing the Russia-Ukraine region when Russia invaded Crimea in 2014. And I think that was one of the things that I also had to deal with, was putting context around this versus all of the other crises that we had managed through, to make sure that the team had the same understanding of what are we facing, what is the context here of the crisis. So yeah, so it was definitely difficult.
Let's come back to Russia and Ukraine later, but firstly you, Alexander, besides all the other crises that hit most of us, or most of you, you also had to do a little turnaround in the middle of that. So what's your takeaway as a leader from the last 3 years?
Well, first of all, I didn't sign up for any of this. So I signed up for a turnaround, and then you kind of plow on Ukraine and pandemics and all whatnot. But I'll start at a different angle. There's been a lot of quotes of famous men here and there, and I want to start there as well. And something Kissinger said. And he said, "Does anyone have any questions for my answers?" And that's a little bit kind of the leadership journey I've gone through, because I also grew up in this great moderation. I didn't even know the name before, but okay, I learned something today. So you've grown up in a quite different way of working, with the exception of the crisis in 08, 09. So somehow it's forcing you to do things much, much faster. You have a lot less, let's say, knowledge of what lies ahead. So it's kind of a dichotomy. So you need to be faster with less data, but you still have to be very thoughtful. So I think from a leadership standpoint, that's been kind of the key challenge, which has been new. And the way we kind of tried to think about this was, first of all, you just have to accept that change is the new normal. Because in the past, we had very little change, as somebody said, high growth, low inflation, rather predictable markets. It's all kind of wiped out. So you have to, the mindset has to be, you know, we need to accept that change is going to come our way, and then organize your thoughts and your teams and your plans accordingly. So I think that was a new element, certainly for me. The other thing in there was also, it's not a one-man show. Maybe when I came in, I thought, you know, been hired to do a particular job. You very quickly realize, no, not a chance. So you had to actually spread the load and involve more people, which again is the strange thing as a leader, because it's faster if you make the call yourself, but now you have to have more people. And when I say more people, I'm engaging the global community of leaders in Pandora, of which many I had never even met. So those are kind of the complications. And then the final point I thought of, it also forced us to think differently about transparency. Just like the capital markets, I mean, of course, most of you would know the story of Pandora kind of being a roller coaster, especially from the capital markets. And they were asking for more transparency. And we were giving, let's say, the traditional transparency of a listed company. But because of this level of uncertainty, we then decided, actually, we're going to open up, let's say, the fold and give, you know, monthly numbers, which is quite unusual. And under normal circumstances wouldn't have done. And some people say, you know, is that really a good or bad thing? But those are some of the things kind of that actually the old ways of doing things, you just had to kind of take a step back and say, hey, that formula is probably not going to work going forward. So those probably kind of key thoughts. Let's
grab hold of that thing about leading your company through change, not knowing what's just around the corner. You all stressed in our conversations that we need to be agile, we need to make decisions fast, we need to rally our organizations around these changes going on in very short periods of time. And that, Jens, can be sort of a cliche, we have to be agile. So to add a little flesh to the cliche, how do you do that? How have you done that over the last few years? I mean, made sure your organizations are agile and can make decisions and you can communicate faster.
We've been in the fortunate situation that we have actually always had a very agile business model of being asset light, as you probably heard us say a lot of times in DSV, meaning that we don't own the production apparatus ourselves. So it actually means that the whole business model supported us in this situation because it's a flexible business model. So that helped a lot, but also to Alexander's point, it's all about as a leader to be extremely visible and also to offer the transparency, both externally, of course, but also internally. And no kidding around also with the severity of the problems, also being honest about what is happening. But this is also where you find in your own organization the difference between the really strong and good leaders and the ones that you cannot kind of rely so much on also after the crisis is over. Because you need to take some really serious and very tough decisions also. It's easy now when we sit here in May 2023, we said, okay, COVID, it was difficult, but from a business perspective, it was not that bad. But we did not know that when we sat there at the very beginning. We had no idea. We made 3-4 scenarios, we presented them to the board, and the worst scenario, or the bleakest scenario, was really, really bad. And the board of directors of our company said, it's not severe enough, it can turn even worse. So that put some pressure on us. We also had to protect the profit of our company. We had to do cost reductions. You've all probably tried that also. It was not easy telling people that they had no job anymore on Teams or virtually, but it's also a leadership skill to do that also, even though it sounds terrible and tough. But about communication, transparency and openness, addressing the difficulties that the company is in is very, very important.
And being open and transparent, Anja, and all these things, you have to be that in a situation as now. You as a leader don't have the answer, you don't have the roadmap, you can't answer everything. How have you dealt with that dilemma that people in this room may sit with on occasion, that we have to do something quickly, I'm not quite sure what?
I think the transparency and being authentic about what you know and what you don't know, and communicating that, and also appreciating that there are different cultures around the world. So in some cultures, you can actually say, I don't have the answer, and still be seen as a strong leader. In other cultures, you go, I don't have the answers, and they're starting running out the door as fast as they can, and they're going, oh my God, they don't know what they're doing, right? So it's finding that balance between openness and transparency about, this is what we know, this is what we don't know, but this is what we're trying to do to plan for the different scenarios or outcomes. I don't think you can create that overnight. So you can't create agility overnight. So if you haven't tried to build an agile organization and something like this hits, then obviously it's going to be much more difficult. But I think for agility, trust and inclusion and cross-functional work. And behind that sits diversity and, again, trust and inclusion, right? So if you have an environment where people feel included and trusted, that they can speak up their minds, then you can actually have cross-functional discussions in a fast way and also just make decisions much faster. If people spent most of the times defining swim lanes rather than swimming, right, then in a crisis, it's going to be really devastating for your outcome.
Let's look into the economic situation, the financials, because we've just heard on stage before you guys, it's very uncertain. Maybe inflation is here to stay for long. Maybe high interest rates are here to stay for long. Maybe there's even recession on the horizon. And you have to plan for that, Alexander. You told me on the phone there's something about fewer swim lines, you said, when you plan financially. What's your advice on planning for financial uncertainty?
I mean, so when the first moment of the crisis hit, we did also these scenarios. I mean, and we literally did 3. One, actually, we're going to have a good outcome. You could have that, as some industries actually had. Then there was kind of, this is my base plan, and then there's a real shit plan. And that shit plan was, we're going to lose half of the business. And then I went to the CFO and said, if I lose half the revenue, what do we need to do? So we became very diligent on cost and cash. So we and we had a pretty good starting point. And that should also be said. I mean, each company has a very different context and starting point. So what I say is maybe relevant for Pandora, may not be relevant for anybody else. But we had a good balance sheet. We doubled up our balance sheet to the point where people say, well, are you nuts? We said, yeah, but if we have that balance sheet, we can actually take 2 years of half the revenue and we'll still stand here. And of course, also then understanding the competitive context, because there is also an opportunity in all of this, right? Where most of my competitors are not that well funded, have rather weak balance sheets, a lot of small companies. So if we are still standing after 2 years of this Armageddon scenario, we'll be the only guy standing, and then the future could be rather bright. So that's kind of how we were thinking about that. And I think that's still true. You need to have at least those quite extreme scenarios in order to force yourself, okay, what does it actually then mean? The bizarre situation we also had was we had just started our turnaround. So I started investing, started to change a lot of things when the pandemic hit. And we had scheduled a global major reorganization to start on April 1. And if you remember, that was not the ideal timing, let's say. And then there was a big question. So do we just sit still and wait until tomorrow brings something new, or do we go? And that's an in-moment decision. Now, if that had gone wrong, you would have had a different person from Pandora here today, but thankfully it worked. And the bizarre thing with the pandemic, it actually forced the reorganization to come together much quicker than under normal. Because, you know, doing reorg, it's like a rubber ball. It bounces back very often. But there was no bounce back here. So actually, we became more agile because, to a large degree, the pandemic, how it forced us to work. So, which is really a weird choice to make, but, you know, it panned out in our case, so.
But this planning for the worst and hoping for the best in some way, when you look into your financials, Jens, you had an amazing year last year financially, high rates, everything was swell and starting to look different, can I put it like that? So in a situation like this, many in the room are in the same situation, how do you plan?
Yes, no doubt about it. It's more difficult, associated with more difficulties than you're used to. But you need to sit down with your team and you have to kind of have a discussion about what you truly believe in. You have to speak to all stakeholders, your customers, the markets, analysts, and then kind of try to make up your own mind. And then you have to plan to that. And then, of course, have the ability to change also if your plans are not working. That is, of course, excuse me, obvious. It's also important to say that, and I truly believe in this, that any crisis also gives reason for opportunities also. When things were very dark back in 2021, we got approached by one of our competitors. We ended up buying them for $5 billion without meeting them even once, face to face, something we would have refused to believe 5 years ago. It was an online purchase, some people say. It was... It was over Teams, and you will probably not believe me when I tell you the name of this company, but the name of the company was actually Agility. So, and I'm not kidding you. But that tells you that the organization is also capable of doing something that you would have refused to believe in the past, and that a crisis also gives reason or gives opportunities that you have to grasp. It's very, sometimes it's also tempting. But then you're out as a leader. But to give up, feel sorry for yourself, say it's so bad, it's the markets, and there's a lot of excuses. But then you will never be the star in your industry. You need to take it as a challenge and say, come on, guys and girls, we need to do something about this. And get this kind of fighting spirit also ignited in the company. And if you have the right leadership team, they will see any challenge as an opportunity also, a fight or a game you need to win, and if you win, it's the best feeling.
Yeah, and I hope you do. But I mean, looking into the next months and years, you guys should have plenty of options to thrive and take chances and exploit all the possibilities, Anja, but you still have the responsibility to make sure it doesn't go really bad. So that planning for something that may be a downturn or a recession, while still, with the other hand, being able to, you know, invest and take chances and make online purchases, that duality as a leader, how do you manage that?
I think, again, just like Alexander said, it comes out which context, which company, which industry are you in. So if you're in the IT industry right now and have been through the pandemic, obviously, no matter which crisis, the IT industry is somewhat the answer, whether it is increasing productivity, whether it's innovating new business models. It's a dual agenda with the climate and digitalization agenda. So there is so much opportunity in the industry. And I think that even though there is some right sizing going on in IT, we have to keep the context that if you look from before the pandemic, it is still growing all the time. There was like this peak of the 2 best years. So I think in my case, it's really about putting the right context. And I guess in all situations, that's what it is about, telling people and making them understand, the right context that they're in. But again, back to honesty and transparency. If you need to cut, be honest about why do you need to cut. You have a responsibility in Dell's situation of 133,000 employees. So the responsibility is making sure the company thrives and continues. And in order to do that, in some cases, there is some cuts that you need to make sure that you do. And again, being transparent and open and, taking the tough choices that you have to take. That's the job.
That's the job. And now it's your job in the room to ask questions about navigating uncertain times. Are there any questions for either one or all three of our guests on stage? Just raise your hand and we'll make sure a microphone gets your way. We have one down there. Please stand up. If you have a question, please stand up. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Peter. I'm from the VL group in Paris. And I have a question for you, Anja. Because a few years ago, I had a client in the States having a lot of programming done in Ukraine. And I was happy to interview all the employees in Ukraine. And they all said, every morning we wake up, we look out the window, and we look for Russian tanks. At that point, this company working with Microsoft, they made a contingency plan. So you said you managed the crisis when they invaded Crimea. Did you have a contingency plan back then?
I don't think we... I was told before that you don't admit you had a contingency plan, but we did not have a plan that said Russia is going to invade Crimea and this is what we're going to do. That is for sure. But we had a lot of contingency plans for likewise crises. If you're having operations in 180 countries around the world, there's been a war in Azerbaijan, Armenia going on for a long time. There is a crisis in Israel, Palestine. There is a lot of crises going on all the time. So what do you do in the situation? There is a contingency plan for that. There is not necessarily with names on it. That said, again, we had development centers in Ukraine, we had development centers in Russia, we had development centers in many other places around the world. And being a dual-purpose product, as IT mostly is, you're very, very quickly hit by sanctions. So, you do have contingency plans for what do we do in those situations, but not necessarily with all the names and all of the puzzles of crisis.
Let's talk a bit about contingency plans, and thank you for that, because did you guys have that for Ukraine, and do you have one for Taiwan? Who wants to go first? Jens?
We did not have any, but we acted, I think, very fast. First of all, we had an obligation. We had at the time 300, and we still do, luckily, 300 employees in Ukraine. First and foremost, we wanted to take care of them, evacuate them if they wanted to seek shelter in Poland or anywhere else. Great initiatives from a lot of DSV employees inviting the individuals home, supporting a lot of NGOs with aid, transportation was needed, so we've done a lot of that. And then we also came to the conclusion that we needed to exit Russia very fast. It was not easy. I actually liked our people in Russia. I've been traveling to Russia many times. Maybe I'm naive, but I don't necessarily think that they support the war. That was at least not what they told us. Had 700 people. We sold the whole company for $1 to management, and we exited, which was not easy because we're a global company, and we might forget that sitting here in Denmark. But a lot of countries around the world, they still deal with Russia. They trade with Russia, and they would expect a global company like DSV to continue to support their supply chain in and out of Russia. If you're a big Chinese or Indian or South African trades company, you would expect us to help them. But we cannot do that, so they have to find local companies. So there's also been some downside, but it feels really good, and we are proud that we are out of Russia. It's the only thing.
So you didn't have a plan for that. Do you have a plan for what to do should something go wrong in Taiwan?
We have a little bit, but not a very detailed plan either. But maybe we can come back to that topic because it's something which is also pretty close to my heart. But
well, you're free to share your contingency plan with us here today.
No, not really the contingency plan, but I think it's just also when we touch upon the topic of Russia, I think that it's actually quite interesting. I think, and believe me, it is the right thing to get out of Russia, and it feels really, really good. But I don't know any other country around the world that was as fast as in demanding companies like DSV to exit Russia. I think it was maybe a little bit over the top also from media side that there was an expectation that we left in a matter of weeks, which is not so easy. And what I'm just trying to say is that if there's an understanding that the same should apply for China, should, God forbid, if something happened with Taiwan, it's two different things. It cannot happen. I just took some statistics with me. In the world every year, approximately 850 million containers are being shipped. Out of those 850 million, 30% comes from a port in China. Out of the 10 largest deep-sea ports in the world, 7 are in China. People say, but just there's 1 billion people in China. There's 1 billion in India. India can take over. So 30% from China, the numbers from India today is 3%. It's impossible. The world will come to a standstill in a matter of 5 minutes if the Western world, Europe, US, should cease cooperation or trade with China. Is simply not going to happen. And it's reciprocal. Chinese, both the economy and of course companies, they also rely on the business. So we hope that things will turn out good. And it was good to hear from the previous debate also that there's at least some chance that will happen. But we are not naive either.
Right. You also withdraw rather quickly from Russia, Alexander. Has that in any way inspired you to plan for political events like the one in Ukraine? For example, in Taiwan?
Not really. I mean, if you look through kind of the value chain of your company, we have very strong business continuity plans for the manufacturing sites, for anything has to do with data, if that goes down, and a few other things. The geographies, it's the diversification of being present in many countries, probably the best contingency plan, because there's going to be stuff happening all around the world, and you can't have a plan for every single geography. I mean, we operate in 100 countries, so the simple answer is no. And attached to that, I think having a strong management team, like you said, around you, that's agile and is willing then to move quickly depending on how things unfold, because there's no one recipe to how things actually happen. And then being close with your board in terms of the value set, that how you operate the business, I think this is the best we can do. I agree with you. China cannot happen. The world just stops. Now, if it happens, okay, then we'll have to sit down and think about what that world looks like. But that's beyond the Armageddon scenario that we have planned for sure. Right.
Anja, you had a remark?
Yeah, so we have in Dell definitely looked at the de-risking of China. So we actually announced back beginning of the year that by 2024 we're going to stop buying any semiconductor products out of China. And we recommended the supply chain to consider how they would de-risk their dependency on China. We've moved a couple of manufacturing plants over the last couple of years. Again, that's not something you do overnight. So we now have manufacturing in all parts, in all continents. So there is a movement, but it's not going to be India overnight. It's not going to be decoupled. There is a long dependency. But we also have, again, back to having products that are being influenced by political situations, we had to look at what do we do if there is a much stronger, which there already had been, export regulations of chips into China. So both buying from China and selling to China for an IT company is way more complex now.
Right. We'll have a second question from the crowd. You have one down there. Yes, please.
Eric Johnson from PwC. I'm advising clients on ESG, and when we're doing so, we're often assessing financial materiality of ESG risks with ERM departments, with your enterprise risk management functions. And I was curious to hear your experiences about dealing with the ERM functions in your companies, if you have them. How much of your decision and dialogue at a strategic and SVP C-suite level is informed by the specialized function in your ERM, and how much of it is more of a scenario-based, high-level decision-making process? And do you see that role changing, becoming more quantitatively driven as we enter a more uncertain future?
It was a little bit difficult to hear.
The maybe question. You could just repeat shortly, and none of us really understood.
ERM, enterprise risk management, how much is it playing a role in your decisions at a C-suite SVP level? Is it changing? How much of it is scenario-based, high level? How much of it is quantitatively driven? Is that changing? Is ERM still relevant at C-suite?
Did that make any of you smarter?
Yeah, now at least we can hear.
Yeah.
Enterprise risk
I'm sorry,
management.
we simply don't understand the question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Third time.
Yeah, enterprise risk
No,
management.
I get it.
You did. Yeah. You got it.
I think I got it. Let's see. Maybe I answer a completely different question. So, back to my opening statement. I mean, of course, as a listed company, you have to. There is a statutory requirement to do risk assessment, and it is rather quantified, and it goes through various committees, including the board sign-off. So yes, we use quant for that. Part of it is, of course, there is some judgment in how you put it on this risk map, but ultimately there needs to be some numbers behind the math. So yes, we use quant.
Any other comments? No? We'll have a question right there. Do we have a microphone? Please stand up.
Thank you. Peter Andersen from VL-109. Ethics, so leading through uncertainty. Is ethics a part of stepping up on leadership in times of uncertainty? Philip mentioned Drucker's famous quote about culture eats strategy for breakfast, and obviously ethics is a big part of culture shaping.
Yes?
Yes, of course. If you're not running your company with a high degree of ethics, you won't get the talent to work for your company. It needs to influence your culture, there's no doubt about that. It's sometimes easier said than done, because if you're also a company that under different kind of regimes or under different circumstances need sometimes to also adjust the cost base, you can debate, is that an ethical way of running the company? Actually share your view, Anja, that sometimes you need to reduce the cost base, to protect the rest, and to develop the company, make the company more successful, attract more investments into your company, and hence over a long period of time grow the company. We've done a lot of really large acquisitions in our company, and where unfortunately at the beginning thousands of people have lost their jobs, but over a long period of time we can demonstrate that we have generated and created more jobs than we have actually cut. So it's a good question, and there's a lot of ingrained dilemmas built into the question also.
I guess that, again, coming back to transparency, I think it's super important. So first of all, you can't run a company without having a certain level of ethics, right? That time is gone. But I think it's super important to be transparent about where do you, as a company, lean in and where do you not. Because there's things happening around the world every day in every country. And as a global company, you can't take all the fights. So sometimes there's going to be fights where you're going to say, you know, I know this is super important for you in XYZ country, and it touches you much more than others. But as a global company, this is not a fight that we're going to go in and take. We're not going to take sides. But we're not going to be supportive of your fight. And so in some cases, when it comes very close to your values as a company, obviously you can't say, I'm going to withdraw from having an opinion. But in other cases, it may not be a core value of what you do. And then in those cases, you can't go into all of the fights. But I think for me as a leader managing Eastern Europe for many years, I was very vocal about the abortion laws in Poland or the LGBT plus community challenges in Hungary, because I thought that that was important for my team to know that they had a safe haven, at least at work, right? But you do that with some costs when you're doing business with the public sector in those countries, right?
Just a small comment, because I actually agree. It's super difficult if you have to have your private opinion about every small issue as a company all the time. So what we are doing, at least what we're trying to do, is just to connect and to adhere to a kind of a global international framework, either by the United Nations or in Europe, European Union, and lean up against that framework and try not to have an opinion, because you can easily get into trouble. There's a lot of mistakes you can make if you try to comment. If you are a global company and you actually work in also countries that maybe not have exactly the same standards as we have in our own country here in Denmark, then there will be sometimes a red line, as we discussed earlier in Russia. We could have continued in Russia. It would have been a losing battle, I'm sure. But we could have done that. Nothing prevents us from doing that. So every once in a while you have to say, even though you are not subject to any sanctions, or it's not necessarily against any international regulations, you just have to take a decision, and it feels really good when you take that decision as well.
So let's end on that wonderfully difficult dilemma, Alexander. You also left Russia in a split of a second, was my impression. What's the next red line where you'll say, business is business, I don't care about the money, I don't care about the business, this is the right thing to do? What's the next red line?
I think you need to be guided by the values that you somehow put on a plaque on the wall. And 9 out of 10 days, people don't care about them because it doesn't matter. Business as usual, it's okay. It's when you get into the tough situations where those values actually come to bear, whether they mean anything. So we spend a great deal of time, talking about our values, training on our values, and that collectively then somehow you get to a point where you understand what is the red line or the green line in a way. But sometimes, like the Russia decision, I mean, I have a particular personal history on that, because the reason I'm here is because Russia invaded Czechoslovakia back in '68. So for me, it was like, it was driven very much by moral principle. And then all the other things came after that. So that's a very specific situation. And I'm not imposing that thought on other companies, because we all have different contexts in which we operate. But that's where that came from. And so I sometimes, if you have a good alignment between the board and the management team and the company general values, I think kind of somehow you understand where the frame of those topics land. But I also wanted to come back on the point you made on running a global company and commenting on all those type of political topics. And there are different thoughts of school here. We have in our mission statement that we are a non-political organization, and therefore we just stay out. And that's obviously a point of view. But my view is always, so even if I am pushed to have a point of view, let's say on Black Lives Matters or the Brexit or the problems with Hong Kong, etc., etc., what gives me the right to have a point of view? Who am I representing? Because our company is not, in its constitution or its way of working, a democratically organization. The viewpoints that I may kind of convey on the stage might be my personal opinions, but I'm not there for me. I'm representing the 30,000 employees, my shareholders, the board, etc. So we don't have a democratic process inside the company to come up with this is the point of view of Pandora on a particular topic. That's why I agree very much with you. We sign up with the United Nations, we have our core values, and that's the frame, and a few other kind of these kind of known institutions. But that's the frame in which we operate, and then we stay away. And it's not because I don't have an opinion. I have an opinion about a lot of things. Ask my wife. But it doesn't mean that it gives me the right to use kind of this platform that the company allows me to have. So I think you need to be very clear as a leader who you're actually representing when you get up on these topics.
Unfortunately, we have to end, but let's end on this note of politics and business sort of getting entangled, which is part of what we're here for today. Thank you, Jens, Anja, and Alexander. What a pleasure having you on stage. Please give them a warm hand. Thank you so much.